For some time, we've been treated to an outpouring of what can only be described as anti-Easter literature, specifically a cult favorite tactic used by the cults. But even the pagan world and Christians are telling us how the holiday, in this case Easter, is pagan in origin and bad, and should not be celebrated by Christians. These opinions are backed up with some very rather unusual and curious fantasies masquerading as historical facts. The following videos are intended only to re-examine popular historical claims of the origins of Easter, to provide further discussions concerning some of the so-called facts offered in some anti-Easter publications.
The usual argument for the pagan origins of Easter is based on a comment made by the Venerable Bede, an English monk who wrote the first history of Christianity in England, and who is one of our main sources of knowledge about early Anglo-Saxon culture. In De Temporum Ration, on the reckoning of time, Bede wrote this: "In olden times the English people, for it did not seem fitting that I should speak of other nations' observance of the year, and yet be silent about my own nation's calculated their months according to the course of the moon. Hence, after the manner of the Greeks and the Romans, the months take their name from the moon, for the moon is called Mona and the month Moneth. The first month, which the Latins call January, is Gili. February is called Salmanoth. March Rithmanoth. April, Iastermonoth. Iastermonoth has a name which is now translated Paschal month, and which was once called after a goddess of theirs named Easter, in whose honor feasts were celebrated in that month. Now they designate that Paschal season by her name, calling the joys of the new rite by the time-honored name of the old observance. The first question is whether the actual Christian celebration of Easter is derived from a pagan festival. This is easily answered. The Nordic Germanic peoples, including the Anglo-Saxons, were comparative latecomers to Christianity. Pope Gregory I sent a missionary enterprise led by Augustine of Canterbury to the Anglo-Saxons in 596-7. The forcible conversion of the Saxons in Europe began under Charlemagne in 772. Hence, if Easter, the Christian Passover festival, was celebrated prior to those dates, any supposed pagan Anglo-Saxon festival of Easter can have no significance. And there is, in fact, clear evidence that Christians celebrated an Easter Passover festival by the 2nd century, if not earlier. It follows that the Christian Easter Passover celebration, which originated in the Mediterranean basin, was not influenced by any Germanic pagan festival. The second question is whether the name of the holiday Easter comes from the blurring of the Christian celebration with the worship of a purported pagan fertility goddess named Easter. In English and Germanic cultures, there are several problems with the passage in Bede. In his book, The Stations of the Sunday, Professor Ronald Hutton, a well-known historian of British paganism and occultism, critiques Bede's sketchy knowledge of other pagan festivals, and argues that the same is true for the statement about Easter. It falls into a category of interpretations, which Bede admitted to be his own, rather than generally agreed or proven fact. This leads us to the next problem. There is no evidence outside of Bede for the existence of this Anglo-Saxon goddess. There is no equivalent goddess in the Norse Eddas or in ancient Germanic paganism from continental Europe. Hutton suggests, therefore, that the Anglo-Saxon Estermoneth simply meant the month of opening or the month of beginnings, and concludes that there is no evidence for a pre-Christian festival in the British Isles in March or April. There is another objection to the claim that Iastermonoth has anything to do with a pagan goddess. Whereas Anglo-Saxon days were usually named after gods, such as Wednesday, Woden's Day, the names of their months were either calendrical, such as Gili, meaning wheel, referring to the turn of the year, meteorological, environmental, such as Salmnath, roughly February, meaning mud month, or referred to actions taken in that period, such as Bltmnath, roughly November, meaning blood month, when animals were slaughtered. No other month was dedicated to a deity, with the exception, according to Bede, of Rithmanoth, roughly March, which he claims was named after their goddess Rith. But like Eostre, there is no other evidence for Rith, nor any equivalent in Germanic Norse mythology. Another problem with Bede's explanation concerns the Saxons in continental Europe. Einhard, the courtier and biographer of Charlemagne, tells us that among Charlemagne's reforms was the renaming of the months. April was renamed Astarmanoth. Charlemagne spoke a Germanic dialect, as did the Anglo-Saxons in Britain, although their vernacular was distinct. But why would Charlemagne change the old Roman title for the spring month to Astarmanoth? Charlemagne was the scourge of Germanic paganism. He attacked the pagan Saxons, and felled their great pillar Irminsul after their god Irmin in 772. He forcibly converted them to Christianity and savagely repressed them when they revolted because of this. It seems very unlikely, therefore, that Charlemagne would name a month after a Germanic goddess.